Hello, it's me, Ariza Gaming, and today I want to talk about the Prehistoric Planet Pack DLC for Oxygen Not Included in general. So this is a Planet Pack style DLC that is quite similar in format to the Frosty Planet Pack that came out a little while ago, in that you get a new asteroid, you get the Relica asteroid with the dinosaurs and the prehistoric vibes. You get a load of new plants, critters, food sources, a couple of new elements, even some new duplicants, a few special buildings, and a few special cosmetics to play around with, and I'm really happy with this update. I think it feels a lot like Terra Plus, in that it feels like playing a normal game of Oxygen Not Included, but the actual mechanics of how you get your food, how you get your oxygen, how you look after your critters and your plants are a little bit more complicated than the base game. I think it's quite an approachable experience for new players, as well as offering meaningful depth to old players, and I think, again, like the Frosty Planet Pack, this is a DLC that I feel really happy about recommending, especially with the Demolior Meteor coming in to potentially stomp your colony. I think there's a lot of really interesting gameplay decisions that are with this DLC and the special lab seed it unlocks. So today I just want to talk about a few of my favorite things in this DLC. We're going to go through the basics of what it adds, and I'm just going to give my spin on everything, and yeah, get it, it's really good. So, first of all, let's start with the Relica asteroid itself. What's so special about it? Well, as I said, the start feels quite similar to Terra in that it's a relatively normal temperature. It's a little bit warmer than average, but not so warm that it's going to cause any problems. The new plant variants that you'll find are all relatively heat resistant. They don't like the cold at all, but they can go up to, say, sort of about 45, 40 degrees C, which suits the start well. Shale and nickel are fairly unremarkable in terms of minerals and metals. They're pretty similar to the other stuff that you'll find on Terra, but the consumable ore that you use for power, peat, is quite interesting instead of coal. First of all, when you put it in a peat burner to generate your power, the peat burner actually produces quite a lot of polluted water as well as the carbon dioxide, so it's not as clean as coal is to burn. But this is good because more waste products means more resources to feed into the colony, and you can filter that polluted water and feed it to the various water-consuming plants. The Ovagro node is a new plant that actually grows vines across surfaces, and the plant itself takes a fixed amount of water in at 90 kilograms per cycle, but each vine segment produces fruit. So if you can get it to grow to its maximum size, it becomes a lot more water efficient with its food production. But equally, you have to balance that with actually fitting the vines around whatever farm or ranch you're trying to set up in your colony. So I think this is a really interesting plant, really nice addition to the game. We have the sweatcorn stalk, which is the sort of equivalent to the mealwood, except it requires pollination. You have to feed it with peat, and it requires pollination. So you've got to make sure that you actually get that sorted out, because otherwise you can run out of food pretty quickly. The new Mimica bud is a plant that actually produces a critter. It produces the flying Mimica. That's a small critter that lives for about 5 cycles. The plant grows in about 5 cycles when domesticated, and the Mimica will just fly around, and you can't ranch it, but it just flies around and pollinates plants with a 25% growth bonus. It's pretty easy to set up. All you need is a little bit of dirt for the Mimica buds. And when the Mimica dies, you get a little toasted mimlet, or you get a little mimlet that you can toast in the grill, and then that's some extra food going. But yeah, having the option to pollinate plants early is quite nice. And you need to make sure you do it early, because the Snactus, which is the muckroot sort of equivalent that you find growing, it grows like the hexalant, and that is just sticking out of the ground. You don't really find it buried. But the Snactus amount of calories is much less than the hexalant. So, somewhat deceptively, you do have to get your plants pollinated and your sweatcorns growing pretty quickly. Otherwise, you could starve quite easily. There's not a lot of food to dig around on this Relica asteroid compared to usual. The starting biome feels a lot like Terra. It's a little bit more complicated. The Lum is a new critter that is very powerful. He likes to eat the Ovagro fruit and will actually produce peat for you. The guy produces a lot of peat for the amount of mass you put into the Ovagro plant. So this could be a really good power source. The Lum itself is a lot of meat. It's tough meat. You have to cook it in the new smoker building that actually requires peat to cook the tough meat slowly over the course of a whole cycle, but then you get a lot of calories per critter, and you get a lot of this nice power generation resource out of them. And with the November update, they've just added the Blum, which is a Lum variant that you get eggs from if the lum is in carbon dioxide, i.e. it detects your base as suffering, and then the blum will actually eat the plants and turn it into algae, and it turns it into a lot of algae. This is actually one of the most water efficient oxygen sources in the game, and they do take a lot of space to ranch, and because they're such old, long-lived critters, it takes a while for their eggs to actually hatch. But if you can get them ranched properly and you can get their population high enough, you can get a lot of duplicates working off them. So they're quite a bit more complicated than hatches are, but the payoff, I think, is a lot higher. Hatches can be a little bit sort of unsustainable when you're ranching them on Terra, unless you've got a load of like volcanoes and you transition to smooth stone hatches for eating the igneous rock from the volcanoes. But lums are a really good sort of long-term choice, and I think they're very cute as well, and they stomp around, and they can actually harvest plants for you. If they detect a harvestable plant, they'll stomp near it, and the food will fall on the floor. So you can actually use this to reduce your duplicate labor as well, which I think is really neat. So that's a starting biome, but we also have a couple of others. We have the Lura plant biome, which is absolutely full of the nits, these annoying flying critters that like to sting duplicates and sting other critters. If they sting someone, then they get a happiness penalty or an athletics penalty and start sneezing if they're a duplicate, but they'll start to reproduce very quickly if they sting anything, and then that's a lot of eggs, that's potentially a lot of lime. But the main thing is, the Lura plant is a carnivorous plant that eats flying critters. So if you can get these nits to breed reliably, because they don't actually eat anything and don't require any input resources, the Lura plant can take those free critters and turn them into the new resource amber. And from the amber you can derive resin. The resin from the tree in the original game, spaced out, has been renamed to sap. But the resin that you get from the amber that the Lura plant produces is your plastic source. You can turn it to plastic. This is very powerful because it's actually just free plastic. You don't have to have any input materials. You just have to get the flying critters, or you just have to get the flying critters breeding properly. Nits are quite easy to breed, but one thing to note is that you also have the radioactive biome on your Relica asteroid. So you could get betas going, and although betas like cold temperatures and Allura plants like warm temperatures, if you have them in a fairly insulative atmosphere like chlorine, you can actually technically put both of them in the same circumstance, and then you don't even need any critters or duplicates to sting. You can just have the betas coming out of the hive and get eaten by the Allura plants, and that's like really free plastic. So that's very interesting. Obviously shine bugs and puffs are other options, but I wouldn't generally recommend them, and you won't find them on this asteroid to start with. But that's pretty powerful. You can find gold amalgam in the Lura plant biome. So kind of similar to the marshy biome on the Terra asteroids in that respect. There's no slime lung to deal with. There's a lot of obsidian, some polluted dirt tiles, a fair bit of sand. But the other thing that I haven't really alluded to yet is the new fish. They've added new fish to this game, and I've been very excited about them. We've talked a lot about them on this YouTube channel already. But the Jorbo is a big fish that eats the little fish, the Pacu. And it's actually an interesting payoff to the whole Pacu breeding thing in the game, in the base game, because normally what you do is you breed the Pacu and they produce a lot of food and they produce a lot of lime, and that's it. And it's like, okay, that's fine, but like we can get food and lime from other critters. But now the Jorbo only eats Pacu or Pacu fillets, and the Jorbo turns that into rust. And rust is very interesting because A, this is an oxygen source, and B, it's a metal ore source. So this is another source of sustainable metal ore, just like the Mammoth, the Regal Mammoth in the Frosty Planet Pack DLC. So you can actually get scalable metal ore production going with these guys. And it's not too difficult. The main difficult part is actually just taming the Jorbos, because they need to eat from the fish feeder, so that means you need to put Pacu fillet in the feeder, and that could be kind of cumbersome because you put a very small amount of it in there. But the payoff is you get the rust, and you can do all sorts of things with it. I really appreciate it when they add reasons to go for specific critter breeding programs, and I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan. And also, they produce like the Jorbo fillets, which again, you can smoke. It's very good food. Even the raw Jorbo fillet is actually really high morale food for the duplicates. So one other thing about this biome is it has the aquatic seacomb plant in it. So this plant consumes polluted dirt and produces leaves that the Paku can eat. Also, you can actually pulverize the seacomb leaves into phyto oil, and this can be used for your Bionic Duplicants if you have the Bionic Booster Pack DLC, or you can also turn it into biodiesel for another fuel source. We'll talk more about biodiesel later as well, but it's a pretty interesting plant. It's always nice to have a good way to get rid of polluted dirt. So, on the other side of the spectrum, we have the Dartle Rex biome, which is a cold biome. It's about -20 degrees C, it's full of iron ore, brine ice, bleach stone, phosphorite, that sort of thing. And the key here is we have the Rex, which is your feather fiber source. This guy produces feather fiber, which you need for Atmos suits. You use it for all the same things that you use reed fiber for, but it's a bit more complicated than the Dreco situation in the base game. The Rex eats critters, it eats meat as well. And it poops brine ice, which you need to feed to the Dewdripper plant. The Dewdripper plant is then eaten by the Dartle, and then the Dartle produces bleachstone and chlorine for you. So it all results in a loop where you end up with some extra chlorine and bleachstone that you can use for your base, but it's kind of complicated to get all these parts to work together. The Rex produces the most brine ice when it eats live critters, so you're probably going to want a mixed ranch design. And this is facilitated by the November update, where they actually made it so critters evaluate their space requirements based on the size of each critter, not just the size of the critter itself. So you can now have a mixed ranch with a couple of Rexes and then lots of the little Dartles running around, and it will all work out. So you've got to get some mixed ranching going on. You've got the off-gassable bleach gas, which you need to bleach stone, which you need to look after, and yeah, it's quite complicated. But I think it's a really interesting challenge for experienced players. You also have some new tools like the Megaphron plant. This produces Megaphron grains, which can be used for a lot of the same things that Sleetweed grains can be used for. But the Megaphron plant actually eats chlorine from the air. And it's very useful, but it also actually requires at least 500 grams of atmospheric pressure. So you can't just have it clean up all the random chlorine in your base like a dash of salt mine. You actually have to have a large amount of chlorine for it to eat it properly. So you're probably going to be wanting to manually off-gas some of the bleach stone that the Dartles produce. You may be lucky and you may actually find a cool chlorine vent as well. This is a new geyser that was added as part of this DLC. And it's the same as the regular chlorine vent, except the chlorine is cold. That's not super exciting. And chlorine has very low conductivity and thermal mass anyways, so it doesn't make a huge difference. But it's nice that they thought of that as well. Yeah. One thing to note, there isn't a huge amount of thermal capacity in the biome overall. The materials are either insulators or not very high mass per tile, so it's a bit harder to dump your heat into this than, say, a tundra biome on the base game, just because there's not so much ice lying around for you to dump all of that heat into, so be aware of that. But yeah, I think it's really interesting, and it gives you a reason to use brine ice, which is a bit of an interesting thing. You can actually take the dewdrop plants. You can actually take the dewdrops from the dewdrippers, and you can actually plant pulver. Okay. Also, you can actually take the dewdrops from the dewdrippers. No. Also, you can actually take the dewdrops from the dewdrippers and you can crush them into brackine using the plant pulverizer. And this actually lets you get brackwax, and you can get some brine out of that. If you fertilize the dewdrips, then you actually get more brine ice out than you put in as well if you freeze the brine afterwards. So you can ignore the Rexes for that and just get your brackine fix that way as well for your automated critter ranching, stuff like that. It adds lots of interesting options to the game, how you're setting up your colony, and it's a bit more challenging than the normal frosty area content that you'd see in the base game, so I really like it. I think it's a really neat addition. So yeah, there's quite a few new things to do with the critters and just getting your colony set up at the start of the game. Quite a few new interesting gameplay loops to get used to, but also the main feature of this DLC is the Demolior Meteor coming in to destroy your colony. Unique gameplay event that is on the Relica asteroid, or the Relica asteroid, which is a lab seed. So basically, normally when you're playing on Relica, you will have 200 cycles before this giant meteor impacts your colony. And when you actually research Initial Research Portal, it will show you the meteor blaster and some infrastructure at the top of the map that you can get set up to try and blow up this meteor. And it will also show you an outline with a very nice snazzy overlay of where the meteor is actually going to land if it lands. And if after those 200 cycles it does land and you don't blow it up, then it will come crashing down vertically from the top of the screen, and it will it will obliterate everything and land on that outline. It will generate an absolute ton of heat as well. It will melt everything in its way. If you don't prepare for it, it is really going to actually destroy your colony if you build it in that outline. But at least you know where it's actually going to land, so if you think there's any doubt about whether you can blow it up or not, then you can just build around it and perhaps sort of wall off the disaster zone and then deal with it later. So I like that there's a few different options of dealing with it as well. You can actually adjust when the meteor lands on the Relica asteroid with the difficulty levels. You can set it as low as 100 cycles, or you can delay it until 500 cycles, or just turn it off if you don't want the meteor. That's fine too, just have a more normal gameplay experience. But you probably want to leave it on because the meteor is very ultimately good for your colony, either whether it lands or whether you blow it up. So if it lands, obviously you're going to have to deal with the aftermath of that. But you are actually going to have a lot of materials that spawn with the asteroid. The meteor spawns in a fixed style, so it won't vary between seeds. And when it lands, it'll have quite a lot of diamond. It'll have a little bit of glass as well. Iron ore, ice, iron. A lot of that will be molten, magma. But the main resource that comes with the Demolior Meteor that you're going to want for your colony is the new material Iridium. And this counts as both a metal ore and a refined metal and has some very interesting properties. First of all, it has an overheat temperature of 500 degrees C. And because you can build it as metal ore and as refined metal, this means you now have heat-resistant buildings for a wide variety of applications, which is even more heat-resistant than steel. And unlike the niobium and the thermium that you get from Spaced Out, this material comes to you. It's a lot more convenient to access. You can actually use this to build some really specific infrastructure, like sour gas boilers, plastic melters, petroleum boilers, a lot earlier than you normally would. And that is all relevant because there is an oil biome on the Relica asteroid by default, and the oil is available via the teleporter if you're on the smaller Spaced Out cluster as well. Yeah, Iridium is a fantastic material to build with. It's also very thermally conductive, and because you get hundreds of tons of it from the meteor impact, you can use it to build things like temp shift plates. It's very convenient for that. It has a melting point of about 2,450 degrees C, so it's not going to melt even if it's in contact with other volcanoes, unless you're really... unless you're not doing it very efficiently, but it's pretty robust is what I'm trying to say. And it's very useful. So the Iridium is the key thing that you're going to want from the meteor when it lands. But you don't actually have to let the meteor land. You might want to let it land as well because it has geysers in it. It will have some volcanoes, it will have some geysers. There's actually usually 2 volcanoes, a hydrogen vent, and an iron volcano in there. So if your Relica asteroid doesn't start with any metal or rock sources, you do get those as part of the meteor impact, so that's nice. And the hydrogen is nice as well for a little bit of extra power. However, you should note that the meteor has some neutronium tiles in it. It has a lot of neutronium tiles in it. So you won't really be able to build your colony over the area where the meteor has landed. You won't be able to launch rockets through the neutronium. So you do have to be a little bit careful about that. And that's particularly relevant when you're on the Spaced Out map, which is a bit smaller, because the actual neutronium is going to cover most of the top surface of the asteroid. You'll have a couple of little bits on the side where the normal neutronium is, where you could potentially set up a rocket chimney, but your options for that are going to be very limited if you let the meteor land. But overall, provided that you plan around the impact and you don't just build your colony where it's going to impact, you can actually capitalize on the meteor landing and not even bothering to blow it up pretty efficiently. However, you probably are going to want to actually blow it up, because if you blow it up, you then actually get a space POI in the star map. You get the Demolior debris, you get the molten Demolior debris, and you get the liquid Demolior debris that you can harvest with your rockets. And this contains a wide range of different resources that you can harvest, wider than you would find from the meteor actually landing itself. And you would blow this up with blast shots, intracosmic blast shots that you make with the blast shot maker. You get those, you launch them off the top of the map with the infrastructure you find at the top of the map. And if you can launch 100 of these intracosmic blast shots at the Meteor, you can blow it up. But the key is, you can automate this, so you can blow it up at the last possible minute. Over the course of the 200 cycles, or whatever you set it to in the difficulty, it will travel from the edge of the star map to the center of the star map. So if you wait until the very last minute to blow it up, all 3 of these space points of interest are going to be right outside your main asteroid, and this means you can harvest them with carbon dioxide rockets. You don't have to set up any complicated rocket infrastructure to grab all of these space materials. And with the changes that they've actually made to the game in November as well, you don't even need a drill cone for your first harvesting. There's actually going to be quite a lot of initial floating resources, including iridium, that you can just grab immediately. So it's fantastic. But yeah, the Demolior debris field contains gold, refined metal gold, granite, mafic rock, and iridium. So lots of useful solids there. The molten Demolior debris contains magma, molten iridium, and also a little bit of liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen, which is kind of wild. You can just find liquid hydrogen, keep that insulated. Maybe you can do something with that. Maybe make some cool stuff going on with that. Who knows? You can also find liquid sulfur, petroleum, and isosap in the liquid Demolior debris. So this actually gives you a source of isosap, which is a bit harder to get in the base game, and you can use this to make your insulate and visco gel. And again, this is a sustainable source of it, so you don't actually need the tree, the Experiment 52B, to get sustainable isosap. So yeah, very powerful to actually blow it up as well. But the choice is yours. You can do whatever you want. There is also lab seed that actually comes with this DLC, where the Meteor may land 10 cycles into the game, so you definitely can't actually blow it up in time. It will land. And that's quite fun. It's also very powerful. Just having access to the advanced materials on the Meteor when it lands, and having all of that initial heat that you can funnel into something, having all of that refined metal from the molten iron, provided that you insulate your base accordingly, that can be a very interesting lab seed to play on. But one thing to bear in mind is that every single geyser on the map will erupt when the Meteor lands. So A, this will reveal every geyser to you. It will remove all the tiles around the geysers. So you know where everything is and you know what there is to build with. But it's also going to be venting a load of hot and cold resources into the map, and making it quite inhospitable for your dupes. So you're probably going to need to get some Atmo suits made with the Rexes sooner rather than later, and you want to make sure that you can keep the Rexes alive, keep like a Rex biome preserved, so that so that you can get that feather fiber. Otherwise, you're going to be in a little bit of trouble. So very high risk, very high reward, a fantastic challenge, both for new and old players, I think. It's just having the iridium available lets you build your colony in a completely different way, because you just have this super heat-resistant material from the start. So yeah, I'm really happy with the flavor that this DLC adds. There's also a couple of new duplicates, Higby and Maya. Higby has a mustache. That's the most interesting thing I have to say about them. And then we have a couple of new buildings as well. I've already talked about the peat burner and the smoker. But we also have a couple of fossil block decorations. If you find fossil on the map, you can actually just turn it into an art sculpture now, and this gives a very high amount of decor, presumably because of the opportunity cost of using it instead of getting lime from it. It gives a very large amount of decor. These things take up quite a lot of space as well, but they're perfect for your sort of great halls and now your banquet halls with the November update. So yeah, pretty interesting flavor options added to the game. There's all sorts of new blueprints for the various different buildings. You have new printing pod skin. The foot massage table with the lum feet is very cute because the duplicates are screaming when they're getting stepped on by the lum feet, but they're still enjoying all the stress reduction. It's great. The gas reservoirs look fantastic as well. You got the stone wheel, rustic manual generator. Loads of fun little blueprints. There's loads of new clothes for your duplicates as well. There's new balloons, new artworks, drywalls. You got a new monument piece, which is Higby displaying his moustache and his little rancher hat. It's fascinating. The new Atmo suits are great as well. I love the Dartle Atmo helmet. It's so nonchalant. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Overall, I would say the amount of content feels a little bit less than the Frosty Planet Pack, but I think the actual complexity of what ends up going on is probably a little bit higher. Obviously, you don't have the really cold temperatures to deal with. It feels a bit more like a normal game experience, but the Meteor adds a really interesting twist to it. I highly recommend this DLC. It's really fun. I'm really glad that Klei are making more DLCs like this. It ties into the content of the other DLCs really well, I feel, as well, adding new options for your Bionic Duplicates with the fighter oil from the Seacomb leaves, and just how the different resources can interact with the different critters from the base game and the other DLCs. I'm really happy to see more of this kind of thing, and I'm really happy to see more of the lab seeds as well. I think those are really impactful. So, what do I want to see from the next DLC for Oxygen Not Included? I'm a big fan of these planet packs, but I think we need to take it up a notch. I think we need to get hot. You guys might know that one of my favorite of the base game planets to play through is the Oasis map, where you're just surrounded by all of the hot sand at the start. I think just having all of that immediate heat to deal with is a really interesting gameplay challenge, particularly for experienced players. And while you do get some of that with the Relica Lab Seed, where all the geysers just erupt immediately and you get the Meteor, I want to see a more balanced asteroid where it's balanced around hot biomes with hot critters and hot plants, using resources in different ways as a result. Like, I'm imagining maybe you start off and you're in a relatively well-insulated normal biome, but then everything surrounding it is just really hot biomes, and these could start like just below scalding threshold, like maybe sort of 50 to 70 degrees C, with really warm critters, but then the further down you go, it just keeps getting even hotter. And you'll find like 400 or 500 degrees C biomes, and you're going to find like really sort of extremophile critters that like eat, I don't know, like molten salt or petroleum or things like that, and give you like really advanced products or really high efficiency processes, but you've just got to handle this really high heat with things that normally overheat. Maybe you can find a little bit of iridium on the map to start with, just so you can build a couple of superheat resistant things, but not loads of them, and then you need to find a sustainable source for that super high temperature heat. I think there's a lot of interesting things you could do with a really hot planet pack for this game. And I've seen this a lot in mods as well, like the Meteor mod adds a lot of interesting wrinkles, and I think, again, this just feeds into my general desire for even more industrial pathways, how to get to certain resources. And I think adding a hot planet pack is the best way to sort of deal with that. It'll give you another suite of tools that you can use. It's going to be a more challenging experience for experienced players, and I think it's the main thing that sort of feels missing. Although I would just like for them to add like a Oasis Minor Moonlet as well to Spaced Out. That's just my little request. And again, I still would really love to see a synthetic asteroid with a Bionic Booster Pack, where you actually have low amounts of water and you have a lot of oil and petroleum available. You've got to get your water out of that, like loads of metal volcanoes, no critters, just resources, just figuring that out. I think that'd be a really good addition to that DLC. But I will say as well, I'm very impressed with how they've updated the Bionic Booster Pack DLC over the last few months. The Bionic Dupes having new skills from the November update, I think, is really going to make them more useful early on. Obviously, the fact that they can use the Atmo suits indefinitely, if they don't take them off, gives them a very good strength as well, and we've really used that in our Twitch runs. So I'm happy that Bionic Dupes are getting a little bit more shine, and I'm glad that they're still being tied really well into the upcoming DLCs. I think that content is getting integrated better into the base game, and I'm really happy with the overall direction they've taken with updating that stuff. But yeah, those are my thoughts on the Prehistoric Planet Pack. Let me know what your thoughts are. Have you been enjoying this DLC? Have you had any funny stories involving the Meteor or perhaps some of the new critters? I'm really enjoying the overall vibe. I think the Frosty Planet Pack is still probably my favorite of the DLCs, just because adding all of those cold biomes, it completely changes the gameplay experience. The Lab Seed was really impressive for that. The geothermal heat plant added a lot of really interesting decisions to the game as well. But I think the Prehistoric Planet Pack is very similar in sort of scope, and I think it's got done really well. But yeah, looking forward to seeing a lot more of these DLCs. And do you want to see any other different styles of DLC for this game? I'd be really interested to hear that. But thanks very much for listening to me ramble about this DLC, and I'll let Whiskers take us out. Bye for now.
Whiskers sends thanks to the following Twitch subscribers and YouTube members: 123 Tweedledum, 999999999, Ayla Ivo, Balance, Cakeface 1212, Neo Deus Machina, Quantum Zari, Stinger's Playground, Sweet Danger Kitty, Christian Nielsen 9363, Luan Lucas 7591, Mark Miller 5161, and Xantiphon.